Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a closer look at A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
One of the most beloved holiday classics of all time.
Absolutely, and we've got a great podcast script here that really digs into the story, and I gotta say, some of the details are pretty amazing.
Like what?
Well, for starters, did you know that Dickens wrote the entire novella in just 6 weeks?
6 weeks. That's incredible, especially considering the impact it's had.
It makes you wonder what was going on in his life that he was so driven to write this story so quickly.
Well, it was 1843, and the Industrial Revolution was in full swing.
Ah, so the setting was a time of huge change.
Exactly. Cities were booming, but there was also a lot of poverty.
So a time of great contrast then.
Yeah, and Dickens was really concerned about the social inequalities of his time.
He was known for his social commentary, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He wanted to use his writing to shine a light on the injustices he saw around him, especially child poverty. That was something he felt very strongly about. So, A Christmas Carol wasn't just meant to be a feel-good holiday story.
Not at all. It was a way for Dickens to address some of the pressing social issues of his day.
But it's also a heartwarming story.
Right, it's a really clever blend of social commentary and holiday cheer. On the one hand, you have this critique of greed and indifference.
Represented by Scrooge, of course.
Of course. But at the same time, you have this message of hope and redemption.
So how does Dickens use Scrooge's journey to make his point about these social issues?
Well, take Tiny Tim, for example. He's not just a cute kid. He's a symbol of the vulnerable members of society.
The people who are often overlooked and forgotten.
Exactly. And by focusing on Tiny Tim's plight, Dickens is really trying to evoke empathy in his readers. He wants them to see the human cost of poverty.
To understand that it's not just an abstract problem, but something that affects real people.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that even though the book was written almost 200 years ago, these themes are still relevant today.
That's true. We still struggle with poverty and social inequality.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes A Christmas Carol so enduring. It speaks to these universal human experiences that we can all relate to.
Okay, so we've got this compelling social commentary woven into a holiday tale. But let's talk about what makes the story so captivating. Why are we still fascinated by a grumpy old man and a bunch of ghosts?
Well, one reason is that Dickens was a master at creating memorable characters.
Like Scrooge.
Scrooge is such a complex character. He starts out as this bitter, miserly man.
But he undergoes a profound transformation.
Right. And that's what makes his story so compelling. We see the possibility of redemption even in the most unlikely of characters.
And what about the ghosts? They're not just there for spooky thrills, right?
Definitely not. Each of the three spirits represents a different aspect of time.
The past, present, and future.
Exactly. And they each force Scrooge to confront different parts of himself. His past choices, his present actions, and the potential consequences of his behavior.
So it's not just about scaring Scrooge into being good.
No, it's about making him reflect on his life and his values. The ghosts are like guides leading him on a journey of self-discovery.
A journey that ultimately leads to a change of heart.
Precisely. Now let's look a little closer at each of the ghosts. The Ghost of Christmas Past, for instance, doesn't just show Scrooge random events from his past.
It's more like a curated selection of memories.
Yes, and they're all chosen to evoke specific emotions. Like the scene where Scrooge sees his former love, Belle, ending their engagement.
Heartbreaking.
It is. And it forces Scrooge to confront his regrets, to see how his choices led him down a path of isolation and bitterness.
And the Ghost of Christmas Present shows him the Cratchit family.
Yes, and the contrast between Scrooge's wealth and the Cratchit's poverty is really stark. But even more important is the contrast in their attitudes.
The Cratchits are happy and loving despite their hardships.
Exactly. They embody the true spirit of Christmas, the joy, the gratitude, the compassion, and this is something that Scrooge has completely lost sight of.
So it's like Dickens is saying that true wealth isn't about money, but about human connection and love.
Absolutely. And that message is further amplified by the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come.
The ghost that shows Scrooge his own death.
Right, and the fact that no one mourns him. It's a chilling vision of the legacy he's creating for himself. A legacy of greed and isolation.
It's a powerful reminder that our actions have consequences.
Not just for ourselves, but for others as well.
So each ghost plays a crucial role in Scrooge's transformation, pushing him to examine his life and his values.
And what's interesting is how the structure of the story itself mirrors Scrooge's journey.
You mean the 5 staves or chapters?
Yes. They follow a clear narrative arc, starting with Scrooge's darkness and ending with his redemption.
It's a classic redemption story, and it's something that we're all drawn to, the idea that even the most flawed individuals can change for the better.
And Dickens' writing is so evocative.
It really brings the story to life.
His descriptions of London are incredible. You can practically smell the roasting chestnuts and feel the chill of the winter air.
And hear the clinking of coins in Scrooge's counting house.
It's those sensory details that make the story so immersive.
And let's not forget the humor.
Oh, yes. Dickens was a master of wit and irony.
I mean, who can forget Scrooge's famous "Bah humbug"?
It's become such an iconic phrase.
And it's a reminder that even though the story deals with serious themes, it's also a lot of fun to read.
Exactly. Dickens knew how to balance the social commentary with entertainment.
Okay, so we've established that A Christmas Carol is more than just a charming holiday tale. It's a social commentary, a psychological exploration of redemption, and a vivid portrait of Victorian England. But how did this story written in just 6 weeks become such a global phenomenon?
Well, that's a great question, and one we'll explore more after a short break. What really took off the book, the first printing sold out in just a week.
Wow, 6,000 copies gone just like that.
And Dickens himself called it a national benefit.
He knew he'd struck a chord with people.
Oh yeah, the story just resonated so deeply with audiences. It quickly spread beyond England, too.
Became an international sensation, huh?
Exactly. It was translated into tons of languages and adapted for the stage almost immediately.
So it really tapped into something universal then.
Definitely. That longing for kindness and the belief in the power of change.
And that makes me wonder, why is A Christmas Carol still relevant in the 21st century? I mean, we live in a totally different world now.
It's a good question. It does seem like a far cry from Dickens' London. But those fundamental human experiences haven't changed.
Love, loss, regret, redemption.
Exactly. And A Christmas Carol explores those themes in such a powerful way that it continues to speak to us even today.
I think that's true. No matter how much technology advances, there are certain human emotions that remain constant.
Right, and Dickens was a master at capturing those emotions.
But some people might argue that the story's a bit too sentimental for modern audiences.
Maybe. But you have to remember that sentimentality wasn't seen as a bad thing in Dickens's time.
It was a genuine expression of emotion.
Exactly. And while A Christmas Carol definitely has a moral message, it's not preachy.
Dickens was a subtle writer. He wasn't trying to beat people over the head with his ideas.
Right. He knew how to weave his social commentary into a compelling story.
One that would entertain as well as enlighten.
And it's not just about Scrooge becoming a good person. It's about him recognizing his shared humanity with others.
Especially those less fortunate than himself.
And that's a message that's perhaps even more relevant today than it was in Dickens' time.
Because we live in a world that's becoming increasingly divided.
Yes. It's easy to get caught up in our own little bubbles and forget about the needs of others.
But A Christmas Carol reminds us that we're all interconnected.
Like that scene where the ghost of Christmas present takes Scrooge to different parts of the world.
To see how people are celebrating Christmas.
Right, from miners to sailors.
Yeah.
It shows that the human spirit is universal.
That we all share the same basic desires for connection and joy.
Yeah, that's a powerful message of unity and compassion.
Something we could all use a little more of these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So while the story might have a Victorian setting, its themes are timeless.
They transcend time and place.
Exactly.
You know, one thing that always strikes me about A Christmas Carol is how it captures the essence of the holiday season.
Even though Christmas was celebrated quite differently back then.
But Dickens really gets at the heart of what Christmas is all about.
The family gatherings, the festive meals, the carols, the sense of warmth and togetherness.
And A Christmas Carol actually played a role in shaping those modern traditions.
It helped to popularize the idea of Christmas as a time for family and charity and goodwill.
It's amazing how one story could have such a lasting impact on our culture.
It really is. It shows the power of art to shape our values and beliefs.
And think about how many different ways A Christmas Carol has been adapted over the years.
From plays to movies to operas.
Even the Muppets did a version.
It's a story that continues to resonate with each new generation.
But let's get back to its relevance today. Aside from the themes of compassion and generosity, what are some specific lessons we can learn from A Christmas Carol?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways is that it's never too late to change.
Scrooge is a perfect example of that.
He starts out as this bitter old man, but he undergoes a complete transformation.
And it's not just about him becoming a nicer person, it's about him recognizing the importance of social responsibility,
Of using his wealth and influence to help others.
which is something we should all strive to do.
Absolutely.
Uh,
We often get so caught up in our own lives that we forget about the needs of others.
but A Christmas Carol reminds us to step back and reflect on our values.
To consider how our actions impact those around us.
And to ask ourselves, are we living in a way that makes the world a better place?
That's a great question.
One that we should all be asking ourselves.
Not just at Christmas, but all year round.
So A Christmas Carol is more than just a holiday story.
It's a timeless reminder of our shared humanity
Of the importance of kindness and compassion.
and of the power of redemption.
You know what really gets me is how Dickens inspires us to think about our own legacy.
What kind of impact do we want to have on the world?
It's a profound question to ponder.
And it's one that A Christmas Carol encourages us to grapple with.
So to our listener out there, we'd love to hear from you.
What was your first encounter with A Christmas Carol?
And how has it shaped your perception of the holiday season?
It really is remarkable how this one story just took the world by storm, you know?
It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, how did A Christmas Carol go from being just a book to this, like, global phenomenon?
Well, I think a big part of it was Dickens himself.
Because he was already so famous.
That definitely helped. But it was more than that. He had this incredible ability to connect with people on an emotional level.
Like, he understood what people were going through.
Exactly. Remember, the Victorian era was a time of massive social and economic change.
With the Industrial Revolution and all that.
Right, and people were struggling to make sense of it all. There was a lot of anxiety and uncertainty.
And Dickens was able to tap into those feelings.
He gave voice to the hopes and fears of everyday people.
And he offered them a vision of something better.
A world where kindness and generosity could triumph over greed and selfishness.
So A Christmas Carol was more than just a story. It was like a message of hope for a society in transition.
Exactly. And it's a message that still resonates today.
Because even though we live in a different world now, we still face many of the same challenges.
Inequality, poverty, social isolation.
And A Christmas Carol reminds us that we have a choice.
We can choose to be like Scrooge,
Bitter and isolated.
or we can choose to be like the Cratchits.
Full of love and compassion. And that brings us to our final thought for today's deep dive.
About.
Well, we've talked a lot about the impact that A Christmas Carol has had on the world. But what about its impact on us as individuals?
What do you mean?
What was your first encounter with the story? How did it make you feel? Did it change the way you look at the world?
That's a good question. I think for me, it was really reading it aloud with my family as a kid.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it became a tradition, and it really helped to shape my understanding of the holidays, you know? Like, it wasn't just about presents. It was about spending time with loved ones and showing them you cared.
That's lovely. And for me, it was actually watching one of the movie adaptations.
Which one?
The one with Alistair Sim as Scrooge. It's a classic. And even though I was pretty young at the time, I remember being really moved by it. Like, it made me realize that everyone deserves a second chance, that even the grumpiest person can change.
And I think that's ultimately what makes A Christmas Carol so enduring.
It's a story about hope and redemption and the power of human connection.
And it reminds us that no matter how dark things may seem, there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
So as we head into the holiday season, let's all try to carry a little bit of that Christmas spirit with us.
Let's be kind to one another,
Yeah.
generous with our time and resources, and mindful of those in need.
And maybe we can make the world a little bit brighter.
One good deed at a time.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into A Christmas Carol. Thank you for joining us, and happy holidays, everyone.